God, thank you for giving us the opportunity to be together this evening and guide and direct us as we go about studying different ways to approach you. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. Now, I said last week, too, that I want to think about what we would do next. And one of the things I enjoy doing is alternating. And, you know, with the sun coming in here, we may have to rearrange what we do here because it's not as convenient as it was. But anyway, the Girl Scouts have stopped meeting, so we can start meeting downstairs. Anyway.
Why don't you just have them sit here and just use the large?
Well, we certainly can.
You're against the sun.
Right.
Look at that and sit in the front row.
Well, we could go be downstairs because nobody will be here because the Girl Scouts will be finishing up. Okay, but anyway, I want you to think about, we'll talk about it at the end a little bit. I like to alternate, a Bible study with something to deal with theology or, like this. So I kind of like to alternate, so it's not just one or the other. So I'd like to do a book of the Bible, look at a book of the Bible, maybe one of Paul's letters that we haven't looked at before, but, want to talk about it. Anyway. Because Henry gave a good idea about maybe something we can do in the future about looking at other parts of Christianity. So what's the difference between a Methodist and a Lutheran? And that's really, it has to do with their dancing ability.
Or an Episcopalian.
Yeah, what's that?
Or an Episcopalian.
An Episcopalian, they dress better. They got a sense of fashion that most Presbyterians don't
I
have.
seen one that he was kind of discouraged today. He had the bell bottoms on. And
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds like...
Going right into church.
A lot of times Episcopalians have little handkerchiefs in their sleeves. Yeah, little handkerchiefs in their sleeves, and they drink.
Now you're doing this morning's lecture again.
Oh yeah, I got distracted. All right, we've been talking about what different people believe. We've looked at different religions. We talked about 3 Western religions that are sort of connected. What were the 3 Western religions that have influenced the West and the Middle East? Okay, you've looked at Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Foundation, what do they have in common? A bunch of stuff, which is, if you say it in Latin, it sounds like you actually, know what you're talking about. Bunch of stuff. What is a bunch of stuff they have in common? Okay, one God with an asterisk, They have an Abrahamic roots. They have prophets. What's that?
Relationship with that God.
Okay, personal, and that's really important, that personal relationship, because that's different as you go further east. So you have a personal relationship with that God. What else?
It's their way or the highway.
Yeah,
If you don't, it's same with Islam,
Yeah.
same with Judaism.
there is one
Way.
There is one way. Now, even if you're talking about a Muslim, or Christian that is what we might call more universalist in perspective, which means they believe in like a universal salvation, they would still say the salvation is through Allah or the salvation is through Jesus. So if a Christian believed a Muslim was saved or was ultimately redeemed, they'd say they were still redeemed through Christ, not through the practice of Islam. So there's still only one way. That way may be broad and may be beyond the person's ability to reject, but it's still one way. And so the idea of conversion becomes really important in Christianity, and Islam used to be important in Judaism, less as history, as it developed as a religion, because it became more and more focused inwardly. So you cease to be looking on the outside. But certainly Islam and Christianity, they're looking for converts. And because there's one way to relate to God, and that is Christianity. What makes Christianity distinct? What makes Christianity distinct? Christ, yeah. That's what makes it. And in particular, what about Christ?
He is God.
That he is God. That he is God. Incarnation. God in human form. That makes Christianity distinct. Islam recognizes Christ, sees Christ as prophet, it's just like Muhammad. Lesser prophet than Muhammad, but still prophet. So a Muslim has no problem with what Jesus taught. Muslim has problems with him being God. The deification, because if Jesus is God, then you have two gods. How can God be everywhere but in the person of Christ? Muslim says that doesn't make any sense. So that's where you got a distinction. If you look at Islam as a religion, what do you remember as some of the foundations of Islam?
No drinking.
Okay, so when you start saying no alcohol, so you talk about some very, very definite moral rules in Islam. In fact, we talked about the 5 pillars of Islam, and
the Jews they had their basics.
Basics of Judaism too. And right, and dietary laws. Muslims follow the same dietary laws. Okay, so you've got these 3 religions have had a major impact on the West and the Middle East. As you go further east, you have some different religions that have a very unique, or from a Western perspective, unique perspective on God. And we looked at Hinduism, and what would you say about Hinduism? What do Hindus tend to believe?
They believe in a better step.
What's that?
They believe in a better step ahead of them.
Okay, they well, hopefully.
Yeah.
You could blow it, and become a slug, but you could, you hopefully, yay for the slugs. So, okay, you could come back. So they've got a different perspective on life. Yeah, that life repeats. So you got this.
In a better position the next time around.
Yes, it's always like a wheel. You don't have one chance. Christians, Muslims, Jews see one chance, one life. Okay, but you've got this continuing thing. What else about Hindus? No personal God. There's no personal God, therefore there's no personal relationship with God. Now you may have personal relationships with gods, divas. Okay, you may have relationship there, and they may intervene to help you, but it is not the same as the big guy. The big guy. It's not unlike what some of the Greek philosophers would teach. Now, so you could have a lot of gods. What then, if there's no personal relationship with God, what becomes sort of the key to Hindu philosophy? What becomes the sort of the foundation? Or if you talk to a Hindu, what would be really, really important to them? Okay, how you live your life. It's living your life. It's having karma that is good. It's a dharma that's that force within you that's a positive. Okay, so it's how you live your life, and how you live your life within that which God has given you. Your lot in life. You live it to the best of your ability, and then you look for something better later, and you're willing to accept where you are now because something better could be there. And this becomes really important for a Hindu. If I am, and there are a lot of different castes. If I'm in an accountant caste, or better yet, I'm an archaeologist that works for one of the Indian states, and it just rang. That's almost a Brahmin.
That's
That's really. Now, if though you were in that caste, and I want to be a preacher. So, I'm going to do things like pray at an assembly, because I'm a wannabe preacher.
That might be a step down.
Yeah.
We don't know how their casts go. Yeah.
We got a preacher tonight. Yeah. If you wanted to, see, that would create bad karma. And you may actually next time, because you weren't satisfied with where you are, you could actually slip down. And that's, as you try to reach this place where you can join that which is, however you define it. And you don't even need to see it as a deity. You know, it can be just sort of an intellect out there. Okay, so we talked about Hindu, which is a lifestyle as much as anything else. Then we talked about something within Hindu, or developed within Hindu, called Buddhism, centered around the teachings of Buddha Siddhartha Gautama, the great Buddha. And what is his deal?
Sit and look pretty.
To look, how does he look, Sandy?
A skinny guy?
A skinny guy, yeah, tall, a lot of hair. Yeah.
Prince.
Yeah, he's a prince.
He's worried about suffering and stuff.
Okay, worried about suffering, and he said people are suffering, that's a bad thing. What can we do about suffering?
Meditate.
Okay, yeah, we can follow. There are 4 noble truths that answer suffering. This is why people suffer. Why do people suffer? Suffering is a reality. You know, therefore, it doesn't matter whether you indulge yourself or deny yourself. Suffering is part of human existence. Okay, what else?
They don't have much to believe in.
What's that?
They don't have really much to believe in.
Well, let's talk about this suffering bit. So suffering's a reality in human life. Right. If you want to then change, you've got to get a handle on suffering, right? Okay, and what is, for Siddhartha Gautama, what is the core of suffering? Why do we suffer? Desire. We crave it. We desire that which we don't have. We constantly want more. We want more. Or better. We are constantly craving. And therefore, to eliminate suffering, we have to stop craving. Now, how do you stop craving? Eightfold path. You know, this is how you stop craving. You get, and if you look at the eightfold, you can kind of divide it into groups. You want to get a handle on your craving, you need to get a handle on your well, yeah, on your living. That's part of it. How you do live, what you do, how you treat other people. What's that?
You need to get a handle on your psyche.
Yeah, you got to get a handle on your head. You know, because a lot of this stuff is coming up here. So you get these right thoughts, right? You get this right living, right? What else are you going to get your handle on? Spirit. You got a spirit inside. You get a handle on that, so you can now that's how you deal with craving. Now, to do those eightfold paths, to accomplish the eightfold eightfold path, you might want to do what? Meditate. You might want to yoga. You may want to
Get motivation.
get motivated. Yeah, get motivated, which is really a good thing. When you talk about getting motivated, you're talking about what?
Moving around. And
Get out and do something. You know, if you're going to live right, you're going to have to get up and live right. You know, so it's not a matter of just sitting around waiting for it to happen. All right. So all of those things are going to lead to this better life, right? And as you move closer and closer to this, then you become enlightened. You become more and more enlightened, right? So you can understand what's happening around you. Okay? So you've got Hinduism that, and again, we're talking about a focus where? On living, right? It's on you. You know, it's not the focus on he. So if worshiping Jesus Christ helps me on my path, my journey, then worship Jesus Christ. If worshiping Henry helps me on the path, then I should worship Henry. Worship Henry. And I know 4 people in Wilton that do worship Henry. And they found that it helps them on their spiritual journey. Okay? Yeah, that's good. Have they sent you any money? No, okay, well, we got to work on that. It doesn't matter what you worship. Now, when we look at both Hinduism and Buddhism sort of start in the same area. In India, both of them are India. What ends up happening?
It doesn't take it.
Okay, Buddhism, and that's why they call it Buddhism, because they were booted. They were booted out, so it's Buddhism. Buddha, and where do they end up going?
East.
They ended up going east, north,
That's all.
down south.
They scattered everywhere.
Yeah, they just kind of spread around, right? And particularly in airports. So they showed up a lot there. And New Martinsville, yeah. In fact, it's in part of Buddha's writings that they would go to New Martinsville. Yes.
The Hare Krishnas are what?
The Hare Krishnas practice Buddhism. They're Buddhists.
So are all Buddhists that annoying? They are the most annoying people in the world.
I've known some Christians that are really fun. They are really annoying too. Buddhists, as a matter of fact, Buddhists really shouldn't be annoying. Why shouldn't Christians have good reason to be annoying? Not that it's present company, accepted, of course, but Christians have good reason to be annoying. Why do Christians have good reason to be annoying?
Because it's not God, it's somebody else.
Well, yeah, but why would a Christian be annoying, a Muslim be annoying?
Because they're doing
What's that? They're trying to convert you, right? Because and understanding this is really, really important, because when either one is trying to convert you, it's not that they want more, well, some men want power over you, want money and that stuff. It doesn't have to be though. If I sincerely believe that unless you do certain things, Christian things, you are damned to eternal hell. You will spend eternity in torment. And I care about you. I'm going to do what? Whatever's necessary to get you to convert. Whether I'm a Christian or a Muslim. I am going to do whatever it takes to get your life to change. And if it means annoying you and pestering you until you say, all right, I'll accept it, just leave me alone, then I can stand back and say, hallelujah. Hallelujah. I've accomplished what I want to accomplish. Okay? Now, there's all kinds of theological issues with that. But, that's why they can be annoying. Buddhists shouldn't be annoying. Why shouldn't Buddhists be annoying?
Because it goes against what they believe.
Yeah, they're not looking to convert you. There's no real conversion. All they're going to do is they're going to present to you a different lifestyle that may enable you to sort of overcome or deal with some of the issues that you have. But they don't care that you convert, leave Christianity and become a Buddhist. For Buddhists, you can be
a radical white right wing of Buddhism.
Well,
They're fringe.
There are fringes of all things. Less with Buddhism, more with Hinduism. There is a very distinct and definite right wing in Hinduism.
But the Hare Krishnas you said are Buddhists.
Are Buddhists.
So they're the real right wing.
See, I thought they were Hindu.
Buddhism.
No, the Hare Krishnas, they're Buddhists.
Okay.
So, but there's an extreme, but there's and the distinction between the two are really fuzzy, because both are emphasizing a lifestyle.
Like those ones in Moundsville there, you can't really look at them as being typical Christians, I mean, maybe you could, but I mean, they're not even accepted by the other Christians. So, yeah.
Well, and that's the case with Buddhism too. You've got all these schools of Buddhism that don't necessarily agree. I mean, even Hinduism. You've got Hinduists that are atheists. And you can be an atheist and a Hindu. But the atheists who are Hindus don't like the theists who have gods. Because they're stupid, and the theists that have gods, the atheists are wicked. And so, you have all these different schools within Hindu. It's very dynamic. But the foundation is lifestyle. That's why when we start looking at some of these Eastern religions, Buddhism can fit with the East Asian religions. Okay? Now, if we think of religions in East Asia, what would come to mind? How would you describe East Asian, Far Eastern religions?
Confucianism.
Okay, Confucianism, what you know about Confucianism? what do you associate with Confucius?
Idioms.
David Carradine? Okay. Well, yeah, David Carradine is considered a prophet to most Confucians. Jokes. Yeah, because he was, people don't know that he was one of the leading Chinese gag writers in the 6th century BC. He was a stranger. Okay, so you should see how we dressed on stage.
Was he really a real man?
Was Confucius a real man?
Yes.
Wasn't made up.
He wasn't a made-out. Well, he wore makeup, but he wasn't a made-out man. So you think Confucius, good jokes? Good jokes. Confucius say, da-da-da-da-da, right?
Don't repeat them.
Yeah.
You didn't hear them from me.
Well,
Shinto.
you're not gonna repeat them?
No.
Okay. Well, you lay a little wisdom on me later. Okay, so, Shinto, and Shinto is Japanese. Okay, so Shinto, we got Shintos running around Japan, we got Confucians running around China. Well, how would you take these Far Eastern religions? What comes to mind? Those are the religions, and we'll talk about it. But what are your impressions?
What they do so great for them.
It's just like,
Okay, ancestors. I saw Mulan too.
yeah.
Ancestor worship, right? So ancestors become important.
Eastern religion, to me, which Western people, at least I could never understand. There's a calmness,
Okay.
they're not so kinetic as people in the West.
Jane, I'm not saying you sit down with your legs all crossed going,
That's right, and you never will.
yeah, I would hear you doing this. But not,
That's right.
with knuckles,
But
really white.
No, it is a calmness.
Okay, it's a calmness.
The Eastern mentality is so different from Western mentality. And also respect.
Okay.
And
respect.
discipline and honor, and elders we take care of.
Which I
you.
think is a great idea.
Yeah, you too.
I
Well,
think
you're
it's a great
young,
idea. Young people like John and Miranda should be looking after. We who are part of the greatest generation. Okay. Philosophical, philosophical stuff.
If your generation would just listen,
Yeah.
take care of it.
Oh yeah, we got some hostility here. All right, so that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at some of these Eastern religions. See, teaching calmness, right? All right, we're going to look at. In fact, we'll look at 3 of them. Confucianism, and Confucius was a real person. Okay, and lived. That means he lived before Jesus, about 400, 500 years before Jesus. Now understand, we're looking at what's going on in the Middle East. This is, and it's kind of interesting, this is the same time that Siddhartha Gautama is working in India. This is the same time the Babylonians are taking the Jewish temple and shipping the Jews off to Babylon. So that's what's going on in the Old Testament. The fall of the kingdom. Greek religion, polytheism is just starting to develop. We're talking about the Minoan culture developing in Crete. So we've got some of the West. In the further West, the Latins are, just running around acting stupid. But this is going on. Confucius was a real person. And Confucius was a lawyer, worked for the king, the court. Now, if he were a lawyer, kind of a person who would work for the emperor and codify laws, would come up with laws, what would we expect to come from Confucius, the teacher?
Dishonesty.
Okay, dishonesty. He'll be the politician. Okay. Wisdom. We're going to expect wisdom coming from him because he's an advisor to the emperor.
Manipulation.
we're kind of moving on two different answers, maybe the same thing. Confucius, well, actually, if he's working for the king, the king doesn't want necessarily that. You know, he wants,
Somebody negotiate.
okay, negotiate techniques on how to do the job well, how to practice justice, and this is what Confucius does, and he writes down these ideas that he has. Now, what's interesting with Confucius is he's living in a time when the Chinese already have religion, and their religion centers around gods because it's polytheistic. They got a lot of gods floating around. They have the respect for ancestors and surrounded by spirits. And Confucius is not very concerned about who the Chinese are worshiping. He's concerned about how the Chinese should live. You know, how can you be successful in the life you've got to live? Okay, and that's what he ends up writing about. So when we talk about the Confucian religion, it's not a theistic religion. It doesn't focus on God. It presupposes all these gods. Now, when Confucius, who was a philosopher, when he was writing, he talked about Ren, which is he meant humanness. Now, what would and that sort of becomes the goal, is to enhance our humanness. What would that be? What would you expect humanness to involve? Okay, how you live your life. And you live your life with kindness. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But your humanness is how you live your life. So he's going to focus, as Confucian writes, on how we can enhance our human life, which would involve practicing kindness, which would involve what?
Golden rule.
Golden rule, which would help me figure out how to be kind, which would involve
Honesty.
what's that? Honesty, which would involve relationships, which would involve respect, possibly being satisfied with what you have, or if you're not, to take action in a way that's appropriate and not harsh. So the emphasis is going to be on developing a humanness, and that's what Confucius is going to write about. Guys, to live this human life, this life with a quality, with a positive quality, involves the practice of etiquette. Of etiquette. Now, when we talk about etiquette, what do we say?
Proper manners.
Okay, proper manners. Now, why do you think proper manners would be for Confucius so important in terms of living a genuinely human life?
You don't want somebody rude.
Okay, okay, good. What does rudeness reflect? That Confucius would say is a real
Bad
problem.
habits.
Because remember, he's looking at how to make the world, this place, this China, a better place, and the people in it better. What would rudeness do?
Negativity.
Bad habits.
What's that? Okay, it creates a negativity, kind of a negative vibe. Okay, and that would be bad. What else does it do?
Bad habits.
Yeah, bad habits. Who does bad habits hurt?
Everybody.
Oh, hurts everybody, right? Hurts you, right? Who have bad habits. Also hurts people around you. So Confucius, if you want to live a truly human life, Confucius developed this extensive code of ethics, li, this proper action. And what would you expect to be part of that ethical code?
Respect others.
Okay, you'd want to treat people with respect. Now, that's good. And I could say to you, Miranda, I think you should treat people with respect. That's really important. Now, you could say, okay.
But you gotta respect them.
Okay, there you go. John is going to ask, how do you do it?
How do you treat?
Yeah, how do you treat? How do I know when I'm doing it? How do I know when I'm treating you with respect?
You get a reaction from somebody.
Okay.
Positive or negative.
Okay, well, how do I know it's positive and negative. What Confucian does is he says, this is how you know. You treat people like
You want
these,
each
you
one.
do these 5 things in the way you relate to people. You know, you do these 20 things in the way you relate to people. That's showing them etiquette, showing them respect, right?
I can't figure out what these people at the computer have to do with this.
Well, there's actions here that are between this man and this woman that are prescribed.
Oh,
They're prescribed actions. Well, why would these prescribed actions be so important?
Just has something to do with
You
your,
don't want
your place in society.
Well, it has less to do with your place in society and more to do with how you can live a genuine human life. In other words, if I want to, and this becomes an issue in a lot of religions that talk about following rules. You know, and we looked at it with the 10 Commandments. If you say, honor your father and mother, which seems to be an appropriate one to talk about. Honor your father and mother. Now, that sounds great, right? Honor your father and mother. Sounds right? Sounds good, Ray? You want to honor your father and mother? Yes, you do. Okay, how do you do that? Did you just nudge your mother? I thought your elbow went out. You know, if you're going to honor your father and mother, how do you do it? How do you know when you do it?
Responsive.
Very, very good. Don't know, right? What would make it easier? If I told Ray or another son in this room, if I told Ray or another son in this room, to honor your father and mother, you need to do these 20 things.
Clean up your room.
Clean up your room.
put your toys away.
Put your toys away. Yeah. Yeah, that may be more pertinent than you can even imagine. You know, that if you want to know how to honor your father and mother, you need to come up with
Sometimes.
some rules to determine. And then when you have the rules, clean up your room, right? That's nice. How do you know when your room is cleaned up? Well, now you gotta have or how do you know when walking through it without falling? You know.
Like I did.
Yeah. So what you end up to know if you're doing this, you need to have some guidance, right? And that's what Confucius does. You know, we are to treat people with respect. How do I do that? Well, it means there are prescribed actions that you need to take when you're around another person. You know, that would show respect. And if everybody agrees on that, I mean both sides, then when I'm there and you're showing that to me, then I recognize you're showing me respect. You know you're showing me respect. So there's that communication. You know, in the West, somebody may, well, I showed you, I do that with my wife all the time. Well, I told you. I did what you said. No, you didn't. Well, why? Because we're interpreting an action in 2 different ways. This avoids that because both sides can interpret the action the way it's intended.
Did he make up the rules? Because they say, Confucius say.
Absolutely.
Did he make up
Absolutely.
his list of rules?
Absolutely.
affecting
That
everything?
is exactly what he did. And these rules involve every aspect of life. You know, now understand, you know, those have to be broken down. Just like the Jews did with the Talmud. You know, you have the basic rules in the Torah, and then you have to unpack them. Because what does it mean to honor your father and mother? What does it mean that I'm not to bear false witness? You know, this killing stuff, even that gets really complicated. How, you know, does that mean I can't ever do that? Well, I've got to come up with certain rules. What if it's accidental? You know, I've got to come up with certain rules to determine whether I'm following the law. And that's what Confucius, that's what he does. You know, how can we live this proper life? Okay, now if that's what I'm doing, what kind of life will the followers of Confucius be living?
A better life.
Okay, they're going to be living a better life because, or at least in their mind, because they're going to be following these rules. What else can you say about their life?
A more quiet.
Okay, maybe a more quiet.
confrontational.
If I
No big
want-
fights and,
Well, and I don't have to worry about showing respect to my parents because
you've killed them.
I've killed them. No, that's a Western thought, killing your parents. You know you're doing it because you're following those 20 rules. And they know you're respecting them, you know you're respecting them, so you don't have to worry about, how is this being interpreted? You know how it's being interpreted. Because that's what the rules say. Now, what else is that kind of life going to be? Now, we're talking about a life that's guided by...
Boring.
Okay, why might it be a little boring?
If it's quiet and, it's like there's no life and verve and...
No spontaneity.
No.
No
No
individualism.
entertainment.
What's that?
No entertainment.
No entertainment, Good gracious. Seeing that parent yelling at the kid in the grocery store, that's entertainment.
No, that's just noisy.
Yeah. All right. So you've got a very regimented life, but that's okay. And loyalty becomes really an important part in Confucian ideas. That you need to be loyal. And who are you going to be loyal to?
Yourself.
You what?
The people
To
you're
us,
used to.
to all people, particularly to your betters, and you're recognizing who are your betters. Really an interesting thing. And what is his goal? What is Confucius? What is his goal? To live right, to live better, to have a better functioning society. Society will function better if people aren't running around making up their own rules, right?
Seems really functional for a population that's not only, a dense population, but it's stratified as well. It makes perfect functional sense.
Absolutely. They had in Confucian, there's a real interesting thing with monarchies, with the emperor. Because remember, they're theistic, they have all these guys. And when we look at the Middle East, and later when we look at the West, the kings were viewed as, the Western Roman emperors, the emperors were viewed as gods. The emperors became gods themselves. Why does that make sense in a society to have your king as a god? Or even, good night, up to the 19th century. You had kings in Europe that said they were ruling by divine right. They weren't gods, but they were kings because God told them to be kings, and God said, you do whatever you need to do to be king. You have to answer to me, you don't answer to the people. Why does that make sense in a society?
Well, look at Hiroshima. They believed he was God.
Absolutely.
The kamikazes, those kids would go out and kill themselves.
Absolutely.
So that's even in this last century, which is...
Absolutely. If I am a king and I'm passing laws to make the society better, laws that I think, or enrich myself, it doesn't matter. You may obey the law if I'm king, right? Because if you don't, I'm going to crucify you, right? But if you think I'm God, Lord have mercy, I've got a lot more authority. You're going to listen to me because I'm God. Well, in China, it's really interesting. They believe that the emperor ruled at the invitation of God. God, in other words, God inspired, called emperors to rule. But, and this is kind of fascinating. The people had a responsibility to, in terms of loyalty, to be loyal to the emperor. But there was an asterisk beside it. And get the logic, because it makes sense. If I am an emperor, and I am doing what God is telling me to do, what should the condition of my country be?
Perfect.
Should be good, right? Things should be good. If I am listening to God and God has called me to be king, then things should be good, right? And as long as things are good, the people should be happy and respect me as the instrument of God. But what happens if things turn south? And things don't turn out so good?
He's gonna get the blame.
What's that?
Not good.
Not good. Does that mean I am still ruling with the mandate of God,
No.
of the gods? Maybe not. And that's this idea of mandate of heaven. I owe my rulers loyalty until there's evidence that maybe my rulers are no longer being blessed by the gods. Because if they were being blessed by the gods, things would work well. And that's when now I have the responsibility, a heavenly responsibility, to do what? To change. Because that mandate is shifted to someone else. And when they have power, the country prospers again. Okay? Mandate of heaven, interesting view of loyalty. Then there's a logic behind it. It makes some logical sense. So God is never going to lead an emperor through horrible times. If things start turning bad, what you need to do is what? Get a new emperor. Get a new emperor that's being blessed by the gods. Okay, that's what Confucius is saying. 5 bonds of piety. There's a responsibility of the ruler to the ruled. What does that mean? And this is a big deal for Confucius. What does that mean? You got to treat your people good. This is kind of a different than you see in a lot of other cultures. The kings have a responsibility to be good rulers. Okay? And how do you know you're a good ruler? Go to chapter 14 and look at the 500 laws on what good kings do. Okay? But there's a responsibility there. There's a responsibility of father to son.
How about father to daughter?
Well, Confucius didn't write about father. They were too busy making the daughter's feet really little. Little feet. Okay, so there's a responsibility to father to son. There's a responsibility of husband to wife. Interesting, husband to wife. As you look at these relationships, what can, even from those 3, what can you say about the relationship?
It's a masculine world and they are dominated.
Masculine world, what else?
Female.
It's a family.
Yeah, it's the one that has power has a responsibility to the one that is subservient. It's the one that lacks power. Okay, so you've got that relationship, so there's always a responsibility of the one that has the authority to the ones who don't. And that's a responsibility you have to fulfill. All right? Elder brother to younger brother, same sort of thing. Friend to friend. And that's the pattern we have in these relationships. And Confucius had this image of the gentleman. This is what men, because it was a patriarchy, a male-oriented society. There was this idea of the gentleman. And what would the ideal gentleman, what would you expect the ideal gentleman to be? Okay, well, perfect. But remember, Confucian is all about rules, right? So if you say perfect, the first thing Confucian is going to say, tell me what that means. What is perfect? What should a gentleman be? Okay, what's that? Should not be an alcoholic. Okay, should not be an alcoholic. Okay, that's good. This guy isn't going to fall over in his little seat. What else would we say about the gentleman? Not a woman beater. Okay, yes.
Doesn't eat with his hands.
What's that?
Doesn't eat with his hands.
Doesn't eat with his hands. Eats with sticks instead. Well, let's think about what you're telling me. What he's not. Let's think about what he is. What is a gentleman? He is educated. He's respectful. He's a family man. He shows the proper etiquette in relationships. He understands his place, right? Okay. So and he's a person who knows
Fashion.
Yes, fashion. He's very fashionable. In fact, I have an outfit like that I haven't worn yet.
I wouldn't be
I'd like
surprised.
to see it.
tough.
She is tough. You know.
She lives in a man.
She goes right for the blood, for the jugular. All right.
Is this being based on a perfect world?
No, Joy. Why would you say it's based on a perfect world?
That's what he's trying to advance for.
Yeah. Now, wouldn't any single woman want to date him? The perfect gentleman?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, but that's the Confucian idea. That the scholar, the one who can meditate, the one that maintains proper relationships, shows respect. This is the ideal. And if you want to know the ideal, you look at, chapter 27 of the book that tells you about the perfect gentleman. What's that?
You have a place to find this information.
Oh, absolutely. No. One of the things with Confucianism is nothing is subjective. Nothing is subjective. Because as soon as subjectivity comes in, then confusion enters. And you don't want confusion. You want to know exactly what you're supposed to do. Exactly. Now, if you have a society that's running on these rules, initially the society, how would you describe the society?
Don't get tired.
Okay, probably should be good, right? Because, these aren't, like dumb rules, go out in the field and whirl a chicken over your head. It's not weird stuff like that. So all of them make sense when you look at it. Sort of like the Old Testament law, when you look at them, you don't have to say, duh. You don't eat shellfish when you got no refrigerating. That's pretty stupid to do. All these rules make logical sense. What might happen over time if you've got these rigid rules?
People will start moving away from it.
Well, people might start breaking it. What else might happen? Okay, the rules can be abused. Even if people aren't violating them or abusing, everybody's keeping them just the way they're supposed to be kept. What can happen over time? What's that? Stagnation, sure. You become stagnant. Or the rules sort of take on a life of their own. And you stop evolving because the rules tell you not to evolve. Yeah. And when the world changes, the rules don't. The rules don't change. They're unflexible. Okay? Now, the Chinese valued this so much that as they developed their society, they were the Imperial Chinese were the first to have really what we think of as civil service, where they would actually take exams to make sure the best and most qualified people were the courtiers, were the rulers. So, in other words, as opposed to the West, where an idiot son may end up taking charge, or in Britain, where an idiot royal ends up, or a duke or an earl ends up commanding a division and leading them into slaughter because he's not equipped to do it, because he's a what? Idiot. Because he's an idiot. Unlike they're doing in the West, the Chinese have this civil service hopefully to have the best qualified people leading the people. And on what did they test? I mean, civil service involves taking some kind of a competency test. What did the Chinese use to test a person's competency? Confucian law. So if you studied up on your Confucius, even though he lived 500 years before Jesus, you studied up on your Confucius, even though it's 1700, or 1800, and we got the American Revolution going on. They are still studying Confucian law, and the exam is, A, B, C. Confucius said this about, how many, letters you should write in a day. A, B, C. That's what they were judging, competence. So they were using these old laws to judge. Okay?
It's been pretty functional.
Oh, absolutely. And you could say that it still functions, because even what the Chinese communists did was they took these 5 bombs and they changed it into 3. They reduced it to three principal relationships to serve the people. And of course you eliminate the ruler to the ruled, etc. But so they used the fundamentals of Confucian thought and applied it to Chinese communism. Okay, because the people were already sort of in. They had the mindset, this Confucian mindset, very legalistic. But again, God isn't particularly relevant here, and therefore in China you can be a good Confucian, follow these Confucian laws of etiquette and honor, and be a Buddhist, still working on dealing with your cravings. Okay, that's why Buddhism and Confucianism function so well together. You would never have a Buddhist temple and a Confucian temple on corners, because one doesn't deal with any kind of God at all. God becomes kind of irrelevant. You don't need it. Okay, but this is Confucian thought. Also, that's what I was saying. A meritocracy that you have to civil service passage exams. Another Eastern religion is Taoism. Now, have you ever seen that symbol? Man, when I was in high school, Chris, you remember high school, geez Louise, you saw this all the time. And what is this? Yin and yang. And what is yin and yang? Now, see, that's what we often think. Good and evil, but it's not.
Is it like a togetherness?
Good
Yeah,
energy.
it's what's that?
Good energy and bad.
It's not even good and bad. It is dark and light. Is dark bad? Heck no. You gotta have dark. You're not dark. If you don't have dark, you don't go to sleep, right? If it's light all the time, you stay awake all the time. Dark, you need dark. You also need light. And what you have with this is light and dark need to be together and in balance. So in Taoist thought, you're looking at balance. You're looking at balance. You're not looking at good and evil. Now there are a lot of religions that do. A lot of people would say Christianity, Judaism, Islam deal with good and evil. There's another religion in Persia called Zoroastrianism. The whole basis is good and evil. The conflict between the good God and the bad God, and we don't know how that's going to resolve itself in the end. That's not what Taoism is talking about. It's a balance between the two, based on the philosophy of Laozi. Okay, basic beliefs in Taoism, basic principles. Now, and you can almost look at Taoism as sort of this reaction. Now, Laozi is living at the same time as Confucius, about the same time.
Same area,
Little further towards Korea.
but still in China.
Same basic area. It is really interesting because what Confucian is going to do is he's going to create rules on how to live life. What Laozi is going to do is he's going to look in and say what we need isn't rules, but rather we're going to need a connection. We're going to need balance. We're going to need a way of living. And where Confucian looked at human rules, because if I'm going to create rules, what am I saying about human beings? Okay. On one hand, I'm saying that's true. I may say they need guidance. But it's the rules. I'm coming up with the rules. I'm not saying these rules have come to me from heaven. These are rules that what? I've come up with. What am I saying about human beings?
They need control.
They're smart enough to come up with the rules on how to live a good life. They're also saying that we can get guidance for human behavior from humans, human thought. It's a Confucian ideas put a lot of value on human thought, right? Taoism, on the other hand, is looking for somewhere else, for what they call Tao, and Tao is your way of life. Now, what would you expect to be in a positive way of life? What would you see if you had to describe the ideal way to live, the good life? What would you say? What's that? Okay, you're talking about a life where you do what is right.
Better
Okay.
control,
Where you what?
a better control.
Okay, maybe where you have a better control of yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. Positive life. What would be in a positive life?
Something good.
Okay, having a job that you like, doing what you enjoy, feeling a sense of security, right? A sense of purpose, having a sense of purpose. All of that would go into a positive life. That becomes the way. Okay? And that's what now what he's going to do though for liaison is Confucian said the same thing. Only what he said is to find this perfect life, you've got to look at the inside the human mind. And the human mind, we can come up with rules that would lead to this good life. Liaison said, no, you don't look inside the human being. There's something else where we can look. And where would be the other place, another place we could look for this ideal life? Because I've got to find an example. Remember when we talked about Confucius, when he said, you need to honor your parents. You're going to say, how? And so he came up with rules. Liaison is going to say, if you want to know how, you need to look somewhere else. Don't look inside your head. Look somewhere else. Where do you think he's telling people to look?
At each other.
Nature.
Nature. That's what he's going to do. You look at nature. Okay? So instead of exalting the human mind, he's going to exalt the natural world around you. Because in this natural world around you, there is balance. There's balance in the natural world. Until what?
Man ruined it.
Human beings step in and screw it up.
Yep.
And so what we need to do is we need to sort of get away from this human stuff that we've created. It's almost like a reaction against Confucianism. We got to get away from some of these human rules that are contrary to what we see in nature. If you want to, even like something like honoring your parents. Confucius is saying, you need to think about it, and these are the 5 ways you can tell. Liaison is going to say what? You want to know how to honor your parents? What do you do? Where do you look? Yeah, you look at how offspring and older animals relate to one another. You look at how saplings and trees live together. That's where we want to look. The human intellect is going to get in the way of that. So you got to push that aside. And that's part of the Tao, is getting rid of those human thoughts that interfere with really living a full life. Okay? And when you follow this idea, when you're able to push aside, you got to get rid of the rules, then your life starts taking on purpose. You acquire in your life what? Balance. You don't have to talk about good and evil, because good and evil is not relevant anymore. You look at the natural. You have good and evil in the natural world. You have relationships. You have life, but you don't label a bear evil, because it's just there. It's just there. And so what Taoists thought, what they're looking for is to create a life that follows this openness to nature that's going to lead to one of balance. And if you feel balance, you're going to also feel what?
Peace.
You're going to feel peace, right? You're going to all of a sudden be relaxed. When you're
less schizophrenic.
less schizophrenic is someone
a lot of
who
today people are imbalance. They're
Sure.
imbalanced. People can't get it
on
together.
mind oriented. Does somebody who follows Confucius, are they relaxed? Well, it might be, depends on who you are. If you're relaxed by knowing what all the rules are, you'd be relaxed. But if you're worried about, what's that?
3-year-old grandson.
Yeah. So what you need is just balance.
Yes.
Balance. All right. You're going to be free from anxiety. Because for him, you look at the nature and you don't see the things going on in the world around that you see in human societies. So it's kind of a liberation from this human society, human ideas that are really screwing us up. Okay. Now, this is kind of, the Taoists believe in getting to a point where you don't need to take action. Why? What do you think he means by living without action?
You're reacting, not acting.
Okay, you're in harmony. What's that?
You're reacting, not acting.
Well, in a sense, you're just being, right? You're just being. So you don't need to take intentional action. You just need to watch it be. He talks about life being like water. He uses water as an image of life. And that water just flows. And if there's an obstacle in the water, what does water do? It just goes around. Just flows around. And that's what he says. We don't need to build these systems to deal with the obstacles. We just flow around. We just flow around. Radical simplicity. In fact, that's one of the ways that you can kind of connect with the natural world, is you give up all this human stuff that we've been taught is important and sort of revert to a more natural and a more spiritual life. Okay? That's what the Taoists are teaching, and it becomes sort of a counterpoint to what the Confucians are teaching. So it's hard to be a Confucian Taoist, although if you wanted to get a job with the government, you better study for the exam. Okay. Now there in Taoism there is a theology. Okay, 3 jewels of Taoism. What kind of life, when you follow the Tao, this is what you're going to see in your life. You're going to see compassion and kindness. You're going to see moderation and simplicity. And you are going to see humility and modesty. Okay? Because all 3 of those are reflected ways. In nature. In nature. You don't have greed in nature. You don't have arrogance in nature. Nature practices what is simple and what is expedient, but it's not ostentatious. Okay. There is, in Taoist thought, there is a sense of God, which is very different than Confucian. Which means the Taoist on is open to like Buddhism as others, because there's a very definite conception of God. And God is that, but it's a God that reveals, is seen, again, impersonal, that is seen in the natural world that surrounds us. It's sort of that force that energizes nature, okay? And becomes more an example of how to live than a personal deity that intervenes for us. Okay, finally we'll talk about Shintoism. Shintoism is the religion of Japan. Okay, Shinto, that's gate of heaven. You see that in Japan, that little figure. Yeah, they well, one of the things is that's where they got the cone heads. It was a real problem in medieval Japan. There were a lot of tough births, Actually, what they're going to do is they're having a dinner later, and they didn't want to lose their oven mitts, and so they decided to wear them.
They must be serving.
Yeah, they're serving.
That's right.
Now, Shintoism is a little different in that there is this rich, in Shintoism, this rich theology. Now, you said, and mythology, you said it is a Japanese-oriented religion. Now, if it's a Japanese-oriented religion, where do the gods hang out?
Mount Fuji?
Yeah, they hang out in Japan, particularly on Mount Fuji. So you're not having, if it's a Japanese religion, you don't end up having the guys living in Toledo. That would make it kind of uncomfortable. So
But they could be in Hawaii.
they could be in Hawaii, but unlikely. Because you kind of want them in Japan. If we do in the future look at other sort of subdivisions of Christianity, one of the things we're going to see with the development of the Mormon Church of Latter-day Saints is it becomes for America. And it makes, again, a lot of logical sense. It becomes the all-American religion. Because although Jesus lived in Palestine, after he lived in Palestine, where did he go? America. The children of Israel were hanging out in Palestine, built their little countries, but some of them, the ones that weren't taken in captivity went where? America. Where is the Garden of Eden? America, right there in Missouri. So it becomes, you don't need to go to Palestine, you don't need to go to Jerusalem, you don't need to go to Rome. All you have to do is go to Missouri and find the Holy Land. And that's what Mormons believe. So they become this all-American religion, a religion that's perfect for Americans because God is here. God is here. He isn't there. He's in Salt Lake City. That's what religions do. That's why in ancient Israel, when the kingdom split, the Israelites had to find another place to worship when they no longer controlled Jerusalem. So they picked Jerusalem as the place to worship God. Okay, so all this stuff with mythology, God has created Japan. The gods actually, if you look at Japanese birth, the Japanese islands are born of the gods.
Volcanoes.
Have you ever been in a place born of the gods? Where they also said where it was born of the gods. Yeah. It wasn't a good one. It wasn't good, but they was still. It was a shot. Yeah, it was not good. It was the one that they locked up in the attic. But it was Japan that they were proud of. They sent him to college, and that's why the gate to heaven is in Japan, because this is the way you relate to the gods, in Japan. All right, so shrines become really important. Why? What are shrines? What is a shrine? A place of worship. More particular, a place to worship, a place where you can
Chill,
but also encounter God. Yes, a place where you encounter God, in the shrine. Therefore, it's a place where you can do sacrifices. Okay. Shrines become important in Shintoism. Kami. Now, kami is really kind of interesting. And it's distinct to Shintoism. Now, understand, Zen Buddhism is the Japanese form of Buddhism. And Zen Buddhism and Shintoism fit hand in glove. I mean, they work together. So you can certainly be both. You would never consider having to choose between the two because they can coordinate very well. The Japanese believe in this idea of kami. And kami is sort of an energizing force. It's not distinctively good or bad. What would that? It's just sort of the life force that we all possess. Now, what would that life force cause us to do? What does it enable us to do? We all share in this kami. That's why we live. What do you think this enables human beings to do? Okay, it enables them to fight, sure. Breathe. Enables them to live. Yeah. This is again not a good or bad. It's not like this is something that's causing you to be a good person. This is causing you to be a human person. It is that energizing force that all people possess. And if all people possess it, that means all people Sure. Yeah, it is something that we all share. Now, since this kami is kind of morally neutral, it's not. It can be evil, it can be good, it can be. It's not necessarily good. So we don't have these two forces that balance one another out. It can lead to actions that are bad. It can lead to bad actions. And that's why there are certain standards of impurity or purity that one would need to follow.
It wouldn't be like a cop.
No.
So it's like a neutral.
That's exactly what it is. It enables us to be human. If we wanted to translate it into Western thought, it would be not soul, but kind of spirit. When it talks about the kavod in the Old Testament, and kavod is the Hebrew word for breath or for spirit. And it's the kavod that in the second creation story in Genesis 2, when God makes the little mud men, he breathes into them, and in Hebrew, he translates that kavod, that spirit, into them, and they become a living being. Now that spirit, and when the spirit is taken back, he dies. The little mud man dies and returns to the mud, returns to the soil, the Adamah. So, that's what the spirit is. It's not enabling a person to be good. It's enabling a person to be alive, right? And then the person can choose, not in Hebrew theology, but certainly by the Shintos, now has the choice on how they're going to live with that energizing. How do you live now that you're energized? And so impurity is important. There are certain things that you do that can make you impure. And if impurity is important, then purification is also important. So there are certain rituals where you can sort of purify yourself. In
these shrines?
Exactly. In these shrines when you're close to the gods. Okay. The Shintos have a strong view of afterlife, which is different than like the Hindus, because it's a personal afterlife. So it's not like the Hindus where you join that great whatever. It's not like the Buddhists where you hit enlightenment and therefore you can stop the process of nature. In Shintoism, you can have a personal afterlife. You have a personal identity that transcends your life here on earth.
So was Hirohito and all of the Japanese soldiers, are they Shintos? Or was that an offshoot of?
No. State Shintoism.
Oh.
Yeah. State Shintoism. Since it is a distinctively Japanese religion, it took on a national complexion, where the emperor becomes the personification of God. Becomes a personification of God. Okay, so it becomes what makes you Japanese. You can practice Buddhism as a lifestyle, because the Buddhism is a lifestyle. But you practice theological Shintoism. That gives you your identity as Japanese, or at least it did until 1946. That's what made you Japanese. That's one reason why Christian missionaries probably had the hardest time in Japan, particularly the Jesuits in Japan, because not only did another religion disrupt society, but it became a threat to the state, because it's that shared belief, and would Shintos be evangelists? Would there be Shintos going to other countries trying to convert people?
You have to be Japanese.
You got to be Japanese. So you're not going to do that. That becomes sort of like Judaism will become. It becomes that sign of your Japanese.
So why were they so the vitriol against the American soldiers? I mean, they were horrible what they did because they weren't Japanese, right?
Exactly.
That ties into another, like the Code of Bushido, which is something more of another different philosophy that's outside of Shinto sort of, which means to serve.
Yeah.
So
But I mean, what they
They
were
actually
so horrible.
thought they were doing the American so bad. Because, Japan, you didn't surrender. So if you surrendered, you were dishonoring your country. So in a sense, they were helping us out by punishing
Yeah, but
us.
what they did.
Well, but if I feel, and you have something, this is a theological interpretation of the same thing that the Nazis are using with their Aryanism. That the Japanese, because of this creation story, the Japanese people are a superior people. They are the children of God. They are in God's land. They have a special mission in the sight of God, which makes them superior to everybody else. Everybody else. God is going to work with the Japanese people to uplift the world. Well, if they're better than everybody else, that means everybody else is below them. Therefore, they don't need to be treated with the same deference and respect as you treat someone who is Japanese. That's why, but the Nazis are working with the same thing with this Aryanism. That somehow Slavs aren't genetically equal. Only the Nazis add this pseudoscience to it. That the Slavs are genetically not equal. Therefore, you can work Slavs, you can work the Russians and the Poles like animals. That's okay, because they are human only in a technical sense. Good night. Slavery, the foundation of American slavery, wasn't initially that, because initially American slavery wasn't racial. Some of these racial ideas developed over the 250 years we have slavery in America, where you start getting this pseudoscience that somehow people from Africa are genetically inferior to people from Europe. Therefore, it is not only allowable, but actually positive to use their labor in the way you would use it. That becomes a good thing because you're passing on a superior culture to them. And that's the way the Japanese would see it. And that's why they were so harsh. And when you add that to, the emperor saying that these, we talk about Muslims and infidels, these inferior creatures, these Westerners, that they're interfering with God's mission here on earth. When you interfere with God's mission here on earth, what do? You get rid of it. You get rid of it. Yeah.
This is a very dumb question. Who is the most arrogant? Maybe the original, most arrogant is coming to mind the easiest of all these religions, thinking that they are the one, God's chosen.
Well, how do you what? I don't know that you can even come up with it. Which is we have human beings taking a step. And I'll answer that in a minute. Any questions about Shinto, about these Eastern religions? Are they going to be? How are they going to relate to other religions?
Not really.
Well, some, Buddhism, the lifestyle, it's a more complex relationship because they still have a very different philosophy about God.
Philosophy seem to fit in pretty well with the ones that are based in deities don't seem to fit in very well.
Right. Although you could be a good Christian and Confucian. You could follow the Confucian laws about etiquette and stuff. You just would have a hard time saying these are godly laws. But you could certainly follow.
We don't recognize it as much, so
Well, they don't have. They haven't. Why wouldn't they have had the influence on the
we
West?
don't recognize it as much as they do.
China built a wall. I mean, duh. China built a wall. Why did China build a wall? To keep everybody out. They
have a whole different mindset.
Yeah, there was a whole different
way
mindset.
of
Fascinating, but a fascinating mindset when you look at the 16th century, because 15th, 16th century, the Chinese are developing trading posts all along the east coast of Africa. They are traveling to India. They are traveling on the east coast of Africa. They are sailing ships that have 4 masts, huge trading ships. Because they want to display the power of China. They were doing all kinds of things. But again, this Confucian idea that we have come up with the laws. Therefore, we have a superior culture. You know, there were people then in the court that says, you know, it's one thing to take the Chinese ideas out. Well, whenever you take Chinese ideas out, what else is happening? You're bringing other ideas in. And they say the cost of these other ideas coming in is too dangerous. And once you've reached the pinnacle, the only direction you can go is down. And so we have got to guard ourselves against, you know, these foreign ideas. And so they pass an edict that you can't build a ship with more than one mast. And they take these huge trading, so you can't sail very far. And you take these huge trading ships and they break them up for firewood. You know, and it ends up closing China off to the rest of the world. But the Chinese were fine with that because they had reached the pinnacle of culture. You know, they had reached the pinnacle of culture. Anybody else was going to pollute. And unfortunately, it meant China did what? Stop development right there. Now, if they hadn't made that decision, not only would the Chinese have planted colonies and outposts all in India and all along the coast of East Africa, there's no reason to think that they wouldn't have sailed, you know, that they would have sailed in the other direction and landed certainly going north and gone along the coast and would have settled in America. And that would have been a whole different history. And they would have done it 200 years before the English ever thought about coming over here. You know, and so we would have looked at an entirely different culture establishing itself in America. I don't think they would have been any more generous towards the people they would have met, you know, because people are never generous towards the people they meet. But it would have been an entirely different history if it wasn't for that decision to close themselves off from the rest of the world. You asked the most arrogant. What is the most arrogant? I think one of the things that's really important, and I'm just sharing, this is my idea. This is what's coming from me. And not necessarily coming from Bible, but I think it shapes the way I read Scripture. We human beings are really, really limited. We really are limited. We're not that smart. We really are. Because in 200 years, we're going to know things that we can't even imagine. We are constantly growing in our awareness, but we'll never know everything. So we're not the brightest, sharpest knives in the drawer, but we think we are. You know, we think we have reached the pinnacle. And where else can we go? You know, I look at a cell phone and I think, how can they make that better? Can't be. Best that it can be. Although I looked at a rotary dial phone when I was a kid and said, boy, that's great. And especially when you could buy them at Walmart. Not Walmart, they didn't have Walmart. Zayres. You could get them at Zayres and plug them into the wall. Your own phone. And when they came out with avocado and beige and not black, boy, that was big time. You remember that? Yeah, boy. You know, that was big time. What's that? Oh, yeah. And you didn't have to hardwire it into your house. So you had more than one. You could have more than one phone. Can't get better than that, right? You
Didn't
know?
have to crank it anymore.
Didn't have to crank it. Didn't have to open the window and shout.
I remember not having to have a party line.
No party line.
We stopped and said, "They got to come and party." Number police.
Can you get better than color television? You know, and you know, my dad talks about radio. You know, what is that thing? Movies in your house. That little 13-inch, 8-inch screen was really great. You know, that you had to get a magnifying glass to make it bigger. You know, we always believe, and I think God understands that, and that's why God speaks to us in images. He speaks to us in metaphors. He doesn't speak to us in things that are intended to be taken literally. He speaks to us in images that we can understand. And as we develop, we can take those images and reshape them so that they're understandable, but they're still images. And what happens in China is they take those Confucian laws and they take them as absolute. And so even though the world has changed in 1,000 years, they haven't. And they resist that kind of change. And I think for people of faith, I think that's the way God communicates, because he's aware of our limitations. It doesn't make sense to me that, so you talk about arrogance, we're all arrogant. Because when we start to assume that the images that we have are absolute, then I'm going to judge yours. I'm going to judge yours as wrong. Now, there are certain things that I believe. I believe in the incarnation of Jesus Christ. That I believe. And I believe he's the Savior of people that don't want to be saved. He's still the Savior of the world. That's what Paul says. That's what Jesus says. Now, how I understand Jesus and how I understand incarnation and how I understand God, the best I can do is to grab hold of these images, these metaphors that God gives us, this story that God gives us, and try to make sense of it, understanding that later people may be able to understand or interpret those stories differently, okay? Just like they've done in the past. It doesn't change the nature of God, but it changes my nature as I relate to it. And the bottom line, though, is the decision to trust that there is something greater than us that cares about us, which separates me from Eastern religions. That there is something there that cares about you. I don't know why, but he just does. And cares about you so much that he took on ourselves so that we could better understand him and he could better understand us. Now, how he did that, I don't know. I've got stories to talk about it. But I don't have any kind of scientific fact. But I don't know whether scientific fact is going to be the same in 200 years as it is now. I mean, particle physics changes everything. I mean, and I don't even understand it. But particle physics changes the whole game, because solids aren't solids anymore. So what is a probability? Rather than absolutes, we've moved from probability because there aren't absolutes. So we can talk about what's probable and what's not. That changes, the game is changing. Now, in 500 years, will the game be changed again? Well, probably twice, as people get smarter. The images, though, still remain the same. And how they're interpreted may change as we change, but the images are the same.
Unlike you, I think we're devolving. No, I'm
Yeah,
serious.
I know.
Machines, and I rage against the machine because I use my brain. Technology is taking over. People are thinking less, and like in the Midwest, they put the chip in. Oh, I can go and get my chips with. I don't want anything foreign in my body. I don't want anyone tracking me. We're being tracked. There's no privacy. It's just like 2001. HAL is going to take over.
That's true.
Well,
And I think human race is devolving, and we better get it together. Put down the junk and start using the brain again.
Well-
I made a point to my husband about,
That's true.
because my kids' generation, I said, what's so messed up about this technology?
They don't
is because
think.
they're so involved around it, they need to know manually how to code, to do things.
They don't
besides
look at each other, they
technology
don't
to do it.
communicate, they don't
What is it?
talk.
Cautious.
They look at the hand. And the old people do it too. I
Well,
just got
and-
that
but-
from Europe.
and-
It's all over there too.
with due respect to that, I disagree. I think we're evolving, and I think communication is changing, but it's changing. It's still there.
Just to bridge the gap between both viewpoints, yours
Right.
and this one, is that it's strictly a cultural thing. And we cannot look at various cultures outside of the shade of our own.
Right.
So, while some cultures, yes, are developing, ours may very well be. Other cultures are staying the same or are evolving. I mean, look at hunter-gatherer. There are no hunter-gatherers, true hunter-gatherer societies left anymore,
Right.
because, they have adopted. So no, yes, while some cultures may very well be evolving, so I'm sharing Ed's optimism that, yes, some cultures will definitely be lost and forgotten. And have there been that in history? Absolutely.
Yeah. Societies change.
That's the one constant.
Yeah, and I think with communication, and I had a good friend of mine when I was working in the college, and he said to me, Be very careful when you use just examples to reinforce information, to reinforce facts and trends. I look at my daughter, and my daughter is really tied to technology. And I'll tell you, she communicates more with her friends through her technology than I ever did with mine. Now, it's not face-to-face. Well, it is face-to-face because she's FaceTiming. You know, so she is seeing them face-to-face. She has far more contact, and I will look at her, and she is far more aware of what's happening in the rest of the world than I was. At least the part of the world that she's interested in. So it's, you know, I don't know. As an old person, you know, I would love, particularly in the church, that the church be the way it was when I was a kid in the 60s. Boy, wouldn't that be wonderful. But it's not, and never will. I wish society were the same way it was. I look at the 70s and I say, gosh, boy, I wish the world was the way it was in the 70s. You know, because I understood that world. You know, I understood that.
The 50s, because the 50s was post-World War II, and the mills were banging, and, you know, neighbors would leave their doors open. It was so peaceful and lovely in the 50s. 60s and 70s, we were kind of rowdy.
So we want to go, you know, we'd say we want to go back to the 50s, unless you're black. If you're black, you don't want to go back to your 50s.
I had that same discussion with a boss of mine once who was telling me how my generation destroyed everything. And I said, well, and how she wanted to go back to the way it was in the 40s and the 50s. I said, me too, when I can slap a woman for talking back to me.
Yeah, and you wouldn't be my boss.
Yes, and she just stopped dead. And I'm like, so let's think about that.
Right, and you have on your little label, oh, dear,
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
alone, I have a
Yeah.
dinner ready.
Yeah, so-
And don't let me have an idea.
I was not afraid.
Sure, because it's a world I know. But I'll tell you something, I like my smartphone. I really like my smartphone. I like to read the newspaper on my smartphone. I know more about what's going on in the world than when I had a newspaper.
There's been some studies that suggest that as we age as individuals, we look back on those times that we know and that we're familiar with, and we long for them. And then when we actually do the pros and cons, are they actually better? Maybe not. But, you know, we just, as we age, we automatically, our brains start to think that way. Because we were familiar with it, we understand.
And we sort of negate the negative.
Yeah, exactly.
We have a remarkable ability, because people, I think, like comfort more than anything else. And one of the things with being comfortable is you've got to get rid of the uncomfortable. What's that?
It was simpler.
Well, we think it was.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll
for us
guarantee
it
you,
was.
when I was in first grade,
Wasn't for me.
and they fired up the air raid tower on the playground of my school, and we had to go in the hall, get down on the floor, and put our heads against the wall, because if the Russians launched their missiles, we had 20 minutes before impact, and us being in the hall with our heads down was going to save us from the 50 warheads the United States, the Soviet Union was going to detonate on Norfolk. You know, that would have saved me, you know, right, with my head down. You know, this, yeah, that's exactly right. Well, you know, drop and roll, that's what I do, duck and roll, you know, be like the little turtle, pull in when that nuclear weapon blows up and everybody's incinerated, because we all had, you know, we had fewer targets than we had missiles, and so you had to detonate 5, you know, missiles. One would have done the job, but we had enough. Why not detonate all 5 of them over Hampton Roads and destroy those naval bases and army bases? So, you know, that's what I
You
lived.
were right there.
Oh, absolutely.
Ooh, yeah.
I can remember clearly in 4th grade, in class, 4th grade, talking. And this is, you know, how old are you in 4th grade? Like 8, 9, something like that? 8, 9? Talking because there was an air raid siren that they tested at 9 o'clock every Saturday. You know, I lived a mile away from the school, could hear it. They tested it every Saturday to make sure. It had barbed wire, had a fence around it, barbed wire around the top of the fence. And I can remember sitting in that 4th grade class talking about, if we heard the siren go off, what would we do? I mean, what would we do? If the siren went off, that meant we had a maximum of 20 minutes. Maximum of 20 minutes. That's if we picked them up as soon as they were launched. Maximum of 20 minutes. What would you do? You couldn't get away from the blast zone in 20 minutes. So, I mean, running would do you no good. You know, we didn't have cars. We were in 4th grade, for crying out loud. Even if we had cars, we couldn't get away. What do you do in the last, and we talked about it, what do you do in the last 20 minutes of your life as a 9-year-old?
Make your peace. That's a
Yeah,
hard thing
so
for kids.
for-
Talk about hard, and that's what we did because it was a reminder. Every time we played on the playground, there was a reminder in front of us that we had 20 minutes. If that ever went off, you had 20 minutes to live. 20 minutes.
I'd have just sit there and cry. We
Yeah.
had the.
Okay, Miranda's ready to go.
My husband's out there.
Oh, well, that's good. So let's have a word of prayer. Lord God, thank you for giving us this time together, and help us at least to be more open to different thought and faith systems. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen.